Hey, how's it going guys? David Cohen here for Learn Now FX and welcome back to another exciting Fusion tutorial. And today we're going to be talking about scripting inside of DaVinci Resolve and Fusion. I got a lot of requests to make a tutorial like this before, and I finally have the time to make one that goes into detail. And even if you don't have any scripting experience or any coding experience, that's okay, because this tutorial is for absolute beginners. So before we can go into making our very first script, first we have to understand what a script is. So a script is a file that contains instructions that tells the program what to do. So in order for us to be able to tell Fusion what to do, we have to tell it to Fusion in a language that it understands. So the main scripting language for Fusion is called Lua, and you can read more about it on lua.org. It is a scripting language that is commonly used in video games. They use it in video game development, and it is also used by DaVinci Resolve and Fusion. So it is fairly easy to learn. It isn't as hard as other scripting languages, but there is a learning curve. I'm going to warn you, there is a learning curve, and it does take a lot of practice to make a useful script that's seamless and that other people can enjoy. If you want to share them or if you want to sell them, it's up to you. But this tutorial is going to cover from the basics how to write a simple script, and by the end of this video I hope that you'll have a solid foundation on which we can build more videos perhaps in the future to write more complicated scripts, perhaps with user interfaces, and have things like with controls that can communicate, and we can have all sorts of interesting things. And if this video does well, we can make more videos about this. So let's get into it. So now that we know what a script is, we need to set everything up so we can start writing a script. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the media pool, and the project settings don't really matter right now because we're not going to be rendering anything, but you do have to be in the Fusion tab just so things work easier. I mean, you don't have to be to script, but I just prefer being there because it's a familiar user interface. So I'm going to right click on the media pool and select new Fusion composition, and the name of the composition doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to click on create, and I'm going to drag the composition onto the timeline. Make sure that your composition is selected and that the playhead is over it, and click on this Fusion icon to head over to the Fusion tab. So now that we're in the Fusion tab, we can start working on our script. So a script has to live in a specific folder for Fusion to be able to see it and to be able to run it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Workspace and Scripts. We have a whole bunch of scripts over here, and that's because I already have all of these installed. These are scripts from Friends, from React, or a whole bunch of scripts. So we want our script to appear here. So I already made one here, but I'm just gonna get rid of this and make a new one and show you what file the script needs to be in. So in order for us to find where the script needs to be, we need to do this. We're going to go to Fusion, Fusion Settings, and Path Map. So we're going to click on this path map, and we're going to scroll down until we see scripts. So I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to click this browse button, and this opens up the folder where our scripts need to be. So we're going to be writing a comp script because there are lots of different kinds of scripts. There are tool scripts, there are utility scripts, there are lots of different kinds of scripts, but the easiest kind to write and the most common kind are comp scripts. So I'm just gonna click on comp. So I want to save this directory so I can get here easily. So I'm just gonna right click and make sure it's selected, right click and select pin to quick access. And now I'm just gonna cancel because I don't want anything to change here accidentally. So I don't need to save, I just needed to find that folder so I can pin to quick access. So I'm just gonna close this, cancel. And now if I open a file explorer and go to quick access over here, here we have our comp folder. Okay, so here we have a whole bunch of scripts that are already installed, and I'm just going to get rid of this one because that's the one I created. So now we need to create a script that we're going to write. So the first thing you're going to need is a script editor. So I use Notepad++, but you can use any script editor you have. You can even use a basic text editor, but I do not recommend it because it is very hard to write code in a standard text editor like Notepad. But Notepad++ is designed to write code. It has syntax highlighting. It has everything you need to write Fusion scripts. You can also use Visual Studio Code. You can use Cite if you want, and that is the recommended code editor that comes with Lua. And you don't need to have this installed, by the way. You don't have to have any of this installed, only the editor that you're going to be using. I just have it installed for other purposes. So I'm gonna open Notepad++, and I'm gonna get rid of the files that were here before. And I wanna save this script in the folder that I showed you before. So I have to write something here first. So I'm just gonna write a very basic script, and you don't have to understand what I write now because it's just like a placeholder. It's not gonna do anything, and I'll show you later what this does. So I'm just gonna write print, open parentheses, quotation marks, hello, space, world, close quotation marks, and close parentheses. So now I'm going to go to File, Save, and Quick Access, and I'm going to go down to Comp. And that is where we want to save our script. So I'm going to call this tutorial script dot Lua. So it has to be .lua, otherwise Fusion will not see it as a script. It has to be .lua. As you can see, the rest of these are .lua. So I'm going to save this, and as you can see, Notepad++ recognizes that now it's a Lua file, so it's code, it's not regular text. So it adds some syntax highlighting. So this isn't really important. It doesn't change the code at all. It doesn't make a difference on how it's going to compile, but it just makes it easier for you as the coder to see functions and strings and stuff like that. Just makes it easier for you to edit code. I'm just gonna save this. And now if we go to our folder here, we see that this tutorial script.lua is in the right folder. So if I go to DaVinci Resolve and go to Workspace, Scripts, Tutorial Script, and I click it, it will run. But it doesn't do anything. The only thing it will do, it will print a message to the console. So if I go to Workspace, Console, it printed a message saying hello world. So if I clear everything here and run the script again, let me just move the console out of the way. Over here, watch the console. So scripts, tutorial script, and it will print hello world. So that's what this print function does here, but we haven't gotten that far yet. So I'm just gonna hit enter a couple times, and remember, Lua doesn't care about empty lines in the middle. It doesn't matter. You can have a lot of empty lines in the middle, but it's good to have clean formatting. Make sure that your code is readable, and not only you can read it, but possibly other people can also read it and easily understand it by keeping your lines clean. And I'll show you what that means a little bit later. So let's get started by learning about variables. So a variable is the way that you can store information in a script that you can access later. So you can access variables, you can modify them. Well, actually, you first have to define them, and then you can modify them, you can compare them, and you can write new values to this variable later. So in Lua, to write a variable, you just have to write the name of the variable equals the value of the variable. Okay, so I'm just going to write that now. My variable. So here's something important, like right away. It's already, we're starting with the rules. So variables cannot have spaces in them. You're not allowed to have spaces in a variable. That's rule number one. Rule number two is that you are not allowed to have numbers at the beginning of your variable. And rule number three is you're not allowed to have hyphens in the variable, like a dash like this. You're not allowed to have that because in the code editor, this isn't a hyphen, this is a minus. Because we do a lot of math in code, that's why this isn't a hyphen, it's a minus. But what you are allowed to have, you're allowed to have an underscore, and you're allowed to do it like this. You can have it one word. So as you can see, I made the first letter of the first word of my variable lowercase, and the first letter of the second word of my variable uppercase. And you don't really have to have a variable like this long. You can just have the variable name can be, I don't know, V or D. It can be any letter. So they don't have to be long. They can be one letter short. So those are the rules about the naming your variables. And one other rule is you cannot have multiple variables with the same name in the same function. And I'm going to talk about functions later. But just remember, don't name your variables the same thing. And one more thing, your variables are not allowed to be named these things. You're not allowed to write, your variable cannot be if, it cannot be then, it cannot be and, it cannot be and, it cannot be or, and it cannot be else. Am I missing something? I don't think so. Oh yeah, it's also not allowed to be function. And yeah, that's basically it. You're not allowed to use these as variable names because they already have an important meaning in Lua. They were already, it's part of the language, so you're not allowed to use these words as variables. So let's get back to our topic. My variable equals, let's say, 25. And that's basically it. We defined our very first variable, and then later we can go and say my variable equals my variable. Yeah, and one more thing. Lua is cap sensitive, so you have to have the same capital letters. You can't write it differently with different capital letters. Equals, so let's try my variable plus 5. Okay, and what we did now in the first line is we defined the variable and we gave it a piece of information. We said hold on to that, we're gonna need it later, we're gonna ask you questions about it later, we're gonna ask you what is your value, so we're going to address it later. So in the second line we say, okay, so we're going to modify my variable now. So my variable equals my variable plus 5. So we're going to say my variable equals, how much is my variable? 25 plus 5. All right, so variables are not only numbers, they can also be booleans. So a boolean is either true or false. So it can be true and it can be false. Also, these two, true and false, you cannot use those as variable names either. So a variable could be a boolean, so either true or false. So those are the simplest kind of variables. A variable can be an integer like 1 or 5 or even 25. All right, and it can also be a floating point number, so it can be 12.567, right? So this is a floating point number because it has decimal points, and the more decimal points you have, basically the more resources go to calculate it. But it's not that heavy. I mean, we're only running the script one time, it runs really quickly. So booleans, integers, and float values. So we can also have a variable can also be, let's say, an array. So that's a list. And this is actually the more complicated side of variables. So we can have a list of like 10 items. So let's just say a list of numbers in the Fibonacci sequence. So 2, and actually I don't remember. Let's do an exponential sequence instead. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. That's enough. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers. So this is a list, and you don't have to write how many members it has. Like other languages, you have to write how many members your list will have. So that's how you write a list, and we'll get back to this later because this is the more complicated side. So variables can also be images and pixels, and that's something we're not going to be talking about at all in this video because it's very complicated, and most of the time you won't need that, only if you're writing a plugin for Fusion, like a Fuse and stuff like that. Like you're probably familiar with our Nova plugin and Turbulent Noise and stuff like that. That's where we use images as variables, but that's not important now because we are not making a plugin, we are making a script. So that's what a variable is and what it can do. So remember, it can be a boolean, which is either true or false. It can be an integer, which basically means a whole number. It can be a floating point number, which is a number with decimal points, and it can be a list. And one more thing it can be, which I forgot to mention, is it can also be a string. I was focused on the math part right now, but it can also be a string. So a string is text that we want to display. So if you want to display text, it has to be inside of quotation marks, and that's how you tell Lua that, okay, whatever's inside the quotation marks, I want to display it. I don't want it to be counted as a variable, because if you don't have these quotation marks and you write hello space world, Lua will think hello and world are variables. So that's wrong. We want to tell Lua that we want the text that's inside, we want it to stay as text. It's not variables. Don't try to count weird math. We don't need that. It's a text. So I'm sorry, I hope I'm not confusing you too much about this, but that's basically it. We covered all we need to know about variables. So let's see this in action. So if I say my variable equals hello world, and then I can say print open bracket, open parentheses, my variable, and that's why I like using Notepad++, because it will suggest it automatically for you. And then close parentheses, and if I save this and run the script again, it will say hello world, and there are no mistakes. So if I change this my variable, it will change here. It will change what it prints. So if I just say hello, my name is David, and then I save it and I go back and I run the script, it will print hello, my name is David. So one important thing to note is that inside of a string you cannot use quotation marks. That's just because it will tell Lua, okay, this string is over, just stop. So that's wrong. You cannot quote somebody inside of a string like this. And another thing is you cannot have a string that is multiple lines. When you use quotation marks, it's limited to being one line. You can have a line that goes like all the way to the end of the file, but you can only use one line. So a simple way to go around this is to use double brackets, so square brackets. So 1, 2, and at the end 1, 2. So now I can have something that goes on for thousands of lines, like a whole script, like a TV script, a movie script. So I can have something that goes on for a lot of lines. And I can also use quotation marks in here, so I can quote somebody. So that's pretty useful, and that's basically it about variables. So let's talk about functions. And this is also a very important part about scripting, is knowing how to use functions. So a function, think of it as a factory. So you give it info, you give it information, it does some calculations in there, and it returns what it calculated. So to declare a function, we just have to write function, and we have to give this function a name. So I'm just going to call it add. All right, and open parentheses, close parentheses. And in here is the information that you want to give the function. So I'm just going to write a comma space b. So I want to give it two variables, and I want the script to add the variables together and return the number that came out. All right. So I'm going to write end, and everything that happens in here is the function. So you have to use these two names. So if I just write return a plus b, it will return the first variable plus the second variable. So when you pass variables into the function out of it, they don't have to have the names a and b. You can let me show you. So one more thing I forgot to mention about variables, sorry. So I like to use local when I declare variables, because it will allow you to use the same variable name in functions. If you don't write local, you cannot do that. So it's a good practice. I don't like to use global variables, because if you don't write local, in front of your variable, then it will be a global variable, and that's not good. I mean, a lot of people use it, but I just don't like using it like that. So I'm gonna write local my first variable, my first var, equals 7, and local my second, sorry, no spaces, var equals 8. And now local p, because this is what we're going to print, so I call it p, equals add my first variable, comma, my second variable. So it doesn't need to be named a and b like we did here. These two variable names are just for addressing it inside of the function. So local p equals add my first variable, my second variable, and now I'm just gonna do print open parentheses p close parentheses. So now if I open the console actually and run our complicated math script, we're going to get 15 because 7 plus 8 is 15. So this is pretty simple. This is the basics of functions, and that's basically it. Functions are very useful, and we can make it a little bit more complicated by using conditions. Now that's the third most important thing to know about when you are writing a script, and that's a condition. So you can say if this and this happens, do this, and if it doesn't happen, do that. All right, so that's actually your bread and butter for when you're writing a script. So you wanna know if this happens, do this, and if it doesn't happen, do that. All right, so that's what we want to tell Fusion. So I'm gonna change the name of this function. I'm just gonna call it max. So it's going to return whichever number is larger. So I'm gonna replace add with max here and here. And now I want to try something else. So now I'm gonna create a variable inside the function, and let me keep this clean actually, because it's actually very bad formatting. And this is what I was talking about keeping your code clean. You want to add some extra spaces because you can't keep code like this. This is not good. You want to add some extra spaces, and there is protocol for how many spaces you add. And in Notepad++, you'll see there's a little line over here. It's kind of hard to see, but that tells you how many spaces you should be adding. I think it's multiples of 3. So, all right. So the spaces don't matter, but it just makes your code easier to read. So what I'm gonna write here is local ret, and this is a commonly used term for the value that you're going to be returning. In many languages, a lot of people use this. It's just like a standard thing that all the coders decided to use. Like, not everyone, but a lot of people use this value as a ret, as the value that a function returns. So I'm just gonna write here return ret. And as you noticed probably by now, it's something I forgot to mention, that Lua doesn't use line endings. You don't have to end lines like in C++. You would end with a semicolon, but in Lua you do not do that. So I'm gonna write local ret and equals 0 for now because we need a placeholder value, and I'm going to write if open parentheses close parentheses a is greater than b. So you can use all the mathematical symbols that you use most of the time. So you can use plus, minus, and you cannot. And if you're wondering how to use multiplication inside of code, you would use this this point here. I think it's called asterisk point. Don't hold me by that because I don't remember what it's called. Asterisk point, something like that. And so you can use all of these symbols like divide and times, plus, minus. So you can use all of these symbols because coding is essentially math and writing combined in all of this. So what I want to do now is if a is greater than b, ret equals a. So if a is greater, then we want to return a. but if a is not greater, that means a is less. So if a is less, then we want to return the greater one, which is b. All right, so ret equals a. So now else means if this is not the case, the first condition is not the case, ret equals b. And now after every if statement we have to add end to show, okay, so the condition is over. All right, so the condition is over. We don't want to keep continuing based on this condition. So that's the basic if statement. So if a is greater than b, return a, but if a is not greater than b, that means b is greater, return b. All right, so I'm going to save this, and let's use larger numbers now. So off the top of my head, let's use 3840 and 2160. So it will return whichever one of these is greater. So let's save that, and I'm just going to clear, and I'm going to run my script. Yeah, so we got something wrong here. What's wrong? Oh, yeah, my bad. If a equals b, if a is greater than b, then else. All right, so let's save that. Yeah, I forgot then. So if a is greater than b, then ret equals a, else ret equals b. So let me save that, clear. And that's why it's good to have live debugging in the console. You don't have to compile every time. You just run the script. So now it returns 3840 because 3840 is the larger number. So if I change this to 20, now it will return 2160. Yep, sorry, wrong one. Now it returns 2160. So that's your basic conditions. So this is actually pretty good. We got 3 out of 4 concepts out of the way, and we've already written, actually it's 3 out of 5 concepts. So we've already learned 3 out of 5 concepts, and we're doing pretty good, but you can't really create something useful with this. We need to make some efficient stuff. So one way to do something that is actually that would be otherwise very annoying is to use loops. So whatever happens inside a loop will happen for as many times as the loop is set to. So if you have a loop that happens 20 times, it will do whatever's inside the loop 20 times. So to demonstrate, I'm going to get rid of this function, and I'm going to create a new function, because functions are a very clean way of coding. So you don't want to keep everything in the main function. And actually we didn't even create a main function, but that is the ideal way to do it, I say, is to create a main function. So I'm just going to write function, and I'm going to call it main, and it doesn't take any arguments, it doesn't need any information, and I'm just going to write end, and then at the end of the script, I'm just gonna run main. All right, so that is the ideal way to do it. And this function, I'm gonna write list names, and again, I'm using camel case. That's what it's called when the first letter of the first word is lowercase and the first letter of the second word is uppercase. So list names, and I don't really need any data into this one. And I'm going to end and return ret. So we don't even need a function for this. Actually, we can do this like that. It's actually more comfortable to do it outside of a function, inside of the main function. So I'm just gonna get rid of all these variables that we created now, and I want to set up a loop. So there are 3 kinds of loops in all programming languages. So you have the most common one, which is a for loop, which does something for a certain amount of times, like 20, 30, 40, 5,000 times, as many times as you want, as many times as you set. And there is a while loop. So a while loop is, it will do something, keep doing something while a condition is true. All right. and an until loop will keep doing something until something happens. Until this happens, right? So you would set that in the while loop. So the most common one is a for loop, and we won't be learning about the other two today because this is the most common one. I like this one the most. I mean, for beginners, it's plenty. So I want to set up a for loop, so I'm gonna write for I equals 1, sorry, and 20 do, and end. So you always want to end the loop. You don't want it to go on for infinity. I actually did that once. That was when I first started coding. I accidentally forgot to set an end to the loop, and it just kept going and going and going until my computer just shut down, and I was like, oh my god, what did I do? But thank god everything's fine. It was just a rookie mistake. So whatever happens between here and here will happen 20 times, starting from 1 and ending in 20. So I'm going to get rid of this print over here, and I'm going to write print, open parentheses, a name. So let's do John, and close parentheses. So what's going to happen is that it's going to print the name John 20 times. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to workspace, console, scripts, tutorial script, and it prints John 20 times. So it would have been annoying to actually have to type print John, print John, print John. So that's nice, I guess. It's kind of fine. It isn't that useful, but we're getting somewhere. So what if I have a list of names and I want to take advantage of the loop to print a different name every time in an order? So that's where the list comes in. So I'm going to go back to full screen. And let's start out with a list. So local list. All right, so this is the name of the variable, list, equals, open curly brackets, closed curly brackets, and we write the list inside. So it's a list of strings. So we have to have quotation marks around every name. So the first one will be John. The second one will be Simon. Also quotation marks around all of them. The third one will be, I don't know, Jake. And make sure you add quotation marks, which I keep forgetting to do. And these are just a whole bunch of friends of mine that I'm listing. I hope they don't mind. And let's see what else we can have. Billy and Sam and Brian. So that's plenty of names. I don't know, just the order that they pop into my head. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 names here, and we only need it to happen 6 times, actually. So since we only have 6 names, we only want to do this 6 times. So I want to show you how you can access, let me just get rid of this loop for now. So by putting dash dash, which is minus minus actually, this turns everything into a comment, meaning that Fusion will not even look at this code. It's not code, it's just you wrote it to show yourself something. And I do recommend writing comments like this, watch. So minus minus, and I would write this is a list of names. So this is a very stupid comment because this is actually very obvious that it's a list of names, but a lot of the times you write comments to either help other people understand what's going on in the code, or you would help yourself, because if you were write a very, very long script, very complicated, like wow, you wrap your head around it, you write the script and it works, it's perfect, you use it all the time, but then in 2 months you have a great idea and you want to add something to your script. You open up your script and you're like, wow, this is so much, it's so hard to wrap your mind around it again. So that's why you write as many comments as possible. Don't overdo it, but only really useful information that will help you remember what you were thinking when you wrote it. And I cannot stress this enough. I do it all the time, and it's very important, because when you write something that's really long, like even if it's the thousands of lines, you want to remember what you were thinking when you wrote it. So that's why I use comments, and a lot of programmers use, a lot of coders use comments. It's completely normal. It's not a beginner thing. And if you're teaching especially, you write comments for other people to be able to see what all of this does. So what I was talking about is to access something. This is actually, this type of variable is called an array. So an array of strings. So every text is called a string, and this is an array of 6 strings. So if I want to access an individual string, I would say print list square brackets 3 close brackets. So it will, this 3 will print the third name. So 1, 2, 3. It will print Jake. So if I save this and I go back to Fusion and I go to Workspace, Scripts, Tutorial Script, it prints Jake because we said print the third item. So this is very good to know, and now we can take advantage of this in our loop. So here's our loop. Everything in here happens 6 times. So I want to get rid of this string here, and I want to access everything from this list. So how can we take advantage of this? How can we do this? Well, it's actually very simple, because this I value over here changes. So every time we go through the loop, I gets 1 higher. So 1 gets added to I. So for the first loop, it's 1, because we said for I equals 1. And every time we go through the loop, 1 gets added to I. So for the first time, it's 1. The second time, it's 2. The third time, it's 3. The fourth time, it's 4. The fifth time, it's 5. The sixth time, it's 6. And once it reaches 6, it stops the loop. So this is actually very useful, because if I print I, right, if I save this and I print I, let me clear this and go to Workspace, run our little script, it's going to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so that's actually very useful. So now instead of printing I can print list square brackets I close square brackets. All right, so now the first time is going to be 1, so it'll print the first name. Second time it'll be 2, it'll print the second name, and so on and so forth. So this is already becoming useful. So we can do something that would be very annoying to do by hand, and we can do it very quickly in a script. So if I save this and go back to Fusion, Workspace, Scripts, and Tutorial Script, it prints 1 after 1 every name on the list. So I'm just going to clear that. And this is good. We already have something, but there's still one more thing that I want to talk to you guys about, and this is the most important thing that I think almost all scripts use, all comp scripts at least, and that is objects. So an object, think of it as a library that contains a lot of data, and Fusion comes built in with quite a few of these objects, and we can use them to our advantage in a script. So the most commonly used one is comp, C-O-M-P, and all on the lowercase letters. So this object contains many properties, many attributes, and many methods. So an attribute is details about it. So let me tell you this. So comp is your current composition. So attributes about the comp would be like the last frame. So comp.renderEnd would tell you the last frame of your composition. So this is very useful information that we can use to get info from Fusion into our script, and use it to modify things in the script. And that's an attribute. This is information about our comp. But what's a method? So a method is even more powerful. A method is when you tell the comp to do something. So we can have info going from Fusion to the script, and then the script can tell Fusion what to do. So this is very powerful, and I'm going to show you how to do this. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this because we don't need this anymore. And now what we're left with is our main function. And now we can use comp. So let's say comp colon add tool. So this is a method that tells the comp to do something. So add tool, and I'm going to say what kind of tool do we want to add? Let's try a fast noise. So quotation marks, and inside I'm just gonna write fast noise. So Control S, and let's try it. We go to workspace. Let me open the console just in case. And now we're gonna go to run our script, tutorial script, and bam, here it is. We have a fast noise. That was pretty easy. So we can get rid of this and we can use it for something else. We can say add a transform node. You just need to know the names of the nodes before you try telling Fusion to add them. So I'm just going to save that, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to try running our script. Scripts. And now we have a transform node added because that's what we told Fusion to do. So we can take advantage of this now that we can tell Fusion to do stuff. So let's do it in a for loop. So for I equals 1, 20 do, and they're just gonna make the indentation better like that, and end, save. So now Fusion is going to add 20 transform nodes, and I'm gonna go back, workspace, scripts, tutorial script, bam, we got way too many transform nodes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 transform nodes, if you look at that. So let's see what else we can do. So another thing that we have at our disposal is comp dot active tool. So this is actually very powerful, and it allows us to control the tool that is currently selected in the composition. So this is, let's say that we have a background selected right now, but I just want to, for the sake of this example, I want to try a fast noise. So we have our fast noise, and I want to modify one of these values. So comp.active tool, and I want to modify, let's say, the scale slider. So let me turn off the checker underlay, and I want to modify the scale. I want it to be 20, but I don't want to set it to 20 by hand. All right, so I'm going to go here, comp.active tool. So now we already know that it's the fast noise node, whatever one is selected. So dot scale, and actually this is actually very deceiving because it isn't, the name of the slider is scale, but if you look down here you'll see that it's actually X scale. So if you look at it, you'll see it's .x scale, because when you unlink it, it actually is the same slider, it just changes its name. So the real name is X scale. So .x scale equals 20. Save that. And workspace, scripts, tutorial script, and now the scale equals 20. This is how you can modify parameters. But what if I wanted to use to set an expression? If I want to set an expression on this scale or on the angle, let's try setting an expression on this angle in the script. So let's try that. So comp.activeTool.xScale colon set expression, and I hope I spelled this right. And in here we're gonna put because every method, every function needs to have these parentheses, and we're going to set it with a string, so we have to have quotation marks. So this is the expression I want to write. So the sine of time, and I want it to be the absolute value of the sine of time, and I'm going to multiply time by, let's see, by 20, and let's see, that's pretty fine. And I'm just gonna multiply it by some other value, so we get like a flicker. I'm gonna copy that, Control C, and I'm just gonna multiply it by this. So I want it to be like a completely random flicker, so it's like completely wild, and that's pretty good. I don't think we can't go above 1 in this expression anyways. I'm just gonna save that, and I'm just gonna select this, go to Workspace, Scripts, Tutorial Script, and now we have an expression on the scale. We weren't supposed to do it on the scale, actually. Let me remove the expression. We were supposed to do it to the angle, so let's do that angle. Let's save that, and let's go here and Scripts, Tutorial Script, and now the expression gets set on the angle, and I'm going to bring the scale back to default. So let's play that. So we get like a really nice shake, like very you can barely see it because the sine wave goes from -1 to 1, and the absolute value makes it go from 0 to 1, and it's just gonna move left and right by 1 degree, and that's no fun at all. So let's multiply this by some higher value, by like 30. So now it's going to be able to move 30 degrees left to right, just from 0 to 30, not from -30 to 30. So let's save that and set the expression again. Script, Tutorial Script. So now we get a completely random looking shake. So that's pretty cool. We can set expressions, we can tell Fusion to add stuff, we can modify values in here, we can do a lot of things in a script. And I hope you guys really liked this video, and if you did, I can make another video that shows how to make more complicated scripts that do more interesting things. Like we can have user interfaces, we can do all sorts of stuff. And I wanna mention that a lot of this was taught to me by my friends Andrew Hazelden, Brian Ray, Sam Treadway, and all my friends at the WSL community. This is just a way to give back and hopefully teach more people to script. And I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want a follow-up video. So until next time, I'm David Cohen, and this is Learn Now FX.